Hello, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And welcome to this episode where we're going to be talking about meeting engagement through the cultural dynamic. Now, I wanted to bring this up because this is a conversation I was having with somebody recently to do with the fact that they feel like they are often and increasingly in meetings where people are not turning on their cameras. And in fact, it's really hard to get any sense of if anybody's there, if anybody is really listening to the meetings. And this particular person had a real concern that they were hearing from one or two people in the meeting, but not always from the whole group or from other voices. And this worried them because it was really hard for them to understand whether people were engaged. In fact, it felt like they were disengaged, and they couldn't really work out how to encourage people to speak up, to contribute to the meeting. Now, if you are a manager or a leader of meetings, then this is really important. You want to make sure that you're hearing from everybody. But I think this is quite important to think about through the lens of cultural intelligence. And this is something that I talk about in my cultural intelligence coaching and training. And it's something that comes up no matter what the context is. So recently, I've been doing cultural intelligence work with individuals who are relocating as leaders from one country to another. Engagement has come up as a topic. I've also been talking about cultural intelligence for early career people who are moving into working in new environments across many different generations. And again, engagement in meetings came up as well. I've also used it with individuals who are starting in a new organization and trying to navigate the dynamics of a new organizational culture, team culture, but also cultures between departments and functions to help them really understand how to engage others. So, this is really relevant, whatever the lens is. And I wanted to talk about the cultural intelligence behavioral preferences that could be impacting that engagement and give you some ideas about how you can adapt your leadership in the meeting to encourage that engagement. Now, before we do, cultural intelligence is a really critical skill. And clearly, it is a skill that matters to you if you are a current or aspiring global leader. And as well as cultural intelligence, there are many other skills that you will need to develop and grow. That's why I've developed a special resource that accompanies this podcast, Global Leader Impact, which is a mini training you can access in your own time and whenever you want. If you'd like to go deeper on some of these topics, then head over to www.culturecuppa.com/leader and you can download that training. I'll put a link in the show notes. In the meantime, coming back to the idea of how do you encourage engagement in meetings through cultural intelligence? Well, the first starting point is really understanding what are the behavioral preferences of the people in the room, whether that's virtual or in person. Now, behavioral preferences are a set of 10 dimensions which have been defined by the Cultural Intelligence Centre to really help bring a language to describing how people show up, how they communicate, how they interact, how they behave in all types of situations at work. And it's a really helpful way to understand yourself first if you do the profile, or even to understand your total team and where the similarities and differences lie. Now, if you're interested in doing your own profile, absolutely be really happy to help you with that. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn under my personal profile, Victoria Reynoldson. But even if you haven't got your personal profile, I'm going to share with you and do a spotlight on three of these particular behavioral preferences, how they impact engagement, and what you can do about this. So, to start off with, one of the big behavioral preferences that could be influencing engagement is whether people see themselves as more individualist or more collectivist. What this means is whether people see how they see their role within the team, whether they see themselves more as an individual within the team, motivated to be part of the team, but really their preference is to focus on individual goals, autonomy, and independence. And they are also people who are often very happy to speak up, share their point of view, and express a personal opinion. For people who are more collectivists and have that preference there, their tendency is to want to operate as more of the group. They like to come together to discuss topics and understand others' points of view before coming to a collective viewpoint. They like to collaborate and agree ways forward as the group, and they're motivated by those team objectives. Now, you can probably already start to guess what the implication of this is within a meeting context. This comes up in the way that people speak up. Individualists, people who have that preference for individualism, much are very happy to unmute and speak up or to share their point of view in front of everybody. They are also people who are expressing their points of view. They often use I. They're talking about what they have done, what they have achieved. And so listening to how much I versus we is in the conversation is a helpful indicator. Meanwhile, people who are more on the collectivist side and have that preference, they are feeling perhaps that they want to have a joint conversation discussion first, or have discussions in smaller groups before they contribute. So you can start to see how this is going to impact engagement. But another behavioral preference is useful to think about together with individualism and collectivism. This behavioral preference is about power distance. You have people who have more of a preference for high power distance and those that have more preference to low power distance. This is about how you think about yourself within the structure of an organization or a team, i.e., about hierarchy. So, again, you can start to see how this might impact engagement. If you are the most senior person in the room or the leader, then and somebody has a tendency for more high power distance, then they may not always feel 100% comfortable to express their point of view before you've done this. Now, I remember back in my first career in marketing, I was in a situation where sometimes I was invited as the most junior person to contribute my opinion first. If I was in an environment that was culturally diverse, that may not always be comfortable for everybody if people are more high power distance. So think about this. Again, how is this impacting your engagement? Are people more high power distance? Are they expecting you as a leader to lead the conversation? May they even be nervous about expressing a different opinion to you, or contradicting or even disagreeing with you? Whereas if you have people who are very low power distance, then they expect to be part of the conversation from the earliest days, the more junior days. They want to be part of conversations with senior managers, and they have no issues with challenging others. Doesn't matter what their level is. So these are two dynamics that I often bring together, two behavioral preferences, because particularly for engagement, they're often interlinked. Individualism, collectivism, and then whether somebody has a more of a preference for high or low power distance. So what can you do about this? Well, if you are the person who's trying to create the engagement in the meeting, clearly you need to think quite particularly about people who are more collectivist in preference or have more of that preference for high power distance, and allow them the space for them to contribute in a way that will work for them. So, for example, you want to really think about creating conversations that allow for you to hear from everybody's voice, not just from the loudest, most extrovert, the most individualist, low power distance people within the room. So, invite that engagement. That means more than just inviting people to unmute to say what they think in virtual spaces or in the meeting room, just looking around the room and asking people to contribute. It might mean thinking about how do you create smaller group discussions or breakout rooms to allow people to really consider what others are thinking before they can come back. It's also about inviting engagement in ways that people feel comfortable. So, thinking really carefully and planning to allow more than just open discussion. That could be as simple as good old chat function within whichever platform you're using. But also think about more anonymous tools that would again create more psychological safety and comfort for those people with preference for collectivist or high power distance as well. So they may prefer to contribute to a word cloud or a poll. They may prefer to even do things like silent brainstorming so they can process their thoughts and see how others are bringing their thoughts on a screen without discussion first. So, this is something to think about. The final area is flexible contribution. Sometimes it's also the pressure of contributing in the moment that means you don't hear anybody speaking up. So, engagement can also be about allowing people to contribute not only in the meeting, but potentially before and after. So, giving them this is called asynchronous contribution, but you might give them a Google Doc or a document where they can capture ideas before they come into the meeting or something to work on collectively afterwards in a shared space. So these are ideas to help increase your engagement, particularly if you're thinking about your team and if they are more people there who have that preference for collectivist and high power distance. But there is another behavioural preference that I wanted to talk to you today about, and that is about this tendency for being more monochronic or polychronic. Now, this is about how you set priorities. And if you are more monochronic, this means mono, singular, means you like to focus on one thing at a time. You're focused on deadlines, timeliness and punctuality matter to you, and you really like structure. If, however, you have people or you know yourself, you are more polychronic, this means that you like to work on many different things simultaneously. This has implications for how you like to work, which means that sometimes priorities are changing regularly. It also means that there is a more flexible meeting agenda. That might mean meetings run late or that you are really focused to change the topic that you want to talk about in that meeting to what is important in the present moment. Now, this is a dynamic, a behavioral preference that can create real frustrations and tensions within teams. And when it comes to engagement, if you have a majority who are either monochronic, so more structured and time focused, or a majority who are more polychronic, others within the room can feel really disengaged and frustrated. So, what can you do about that? What are the ideas to manage that and to increase engagement? This is where having some form of team communication charter can really help. This is about establishing the principles, behaviors, ways of working and interacting in a meeting that is going to work best for the team. This is about making explicit real details such as structure, time, how you're going to handle disagreements, or if people are changing topics. And it really puts boundaries around what the expectations are with how people engage in those meetings. Now, this is something that I do in my work with teams. Sometimes it's not easy to do this collectively as a group. It really helps sometimes to have an independent facilitator help you think about this and work out what is the best way. But it's only through that open dialogue, through that conversation, that you can specify it and agree which is the way that's going to work best for you as a group. It's only by doing this that you can work through the tension that naturally exists between the ways of working and the way that people prioritize when they have strong tendencies between being monochronic or polychronic. So, really consider this as an important part of engagement as well. Now, this is obviously not everything about cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence is a huge topic, but I thought this deep dive and spotlight today on the cultural dynamic within meeting engagement was really helpful, particularly off the back of the conversation I had earlier on. And I think this is something that is important for all leaders to help them, or any manager actually, of a meeting where you need to really ensure that you're not just staring at a whole load of black windows where people have their cameras off and nobody is saying anything. There is no voice being expressed. Or even worse, you're only hearing from one or two people within a group. Now, I've already mentioned if you're interested in cultural intelligence, then please feel free to reach out to me either for yourself as an individual or for your team if you want to explore this in more detail and how this can help you be more effective in your meetings, but across all areas of your work. I also mentioned that cultural intelligence is only really one core area of many skills that you need as a global leader. And there is a resource that goes with this podcast that allows you to explore these in more detail in your own time at a time that suits you. So if you'd like to get hold of that resource, all you need to do is head over to www.culturecuppa.com/leader and you can access that straight away. So as we wrap up today's episodes, let me ask you these questions. What of all of these behavioral preferences that I've mentioned here today, what do you recognize as your own preference, either strong or mild? What do you recognize in your team, and what could be causing challenges and issues in your engagement in meetings? I'd love to know. And it's always really interesting to hear your thoughts and feedback. So if you'd like to be in touch, head over to LinkedIn and you can message me there on my personal profile, Victoria Reynoldson. And I'll put the link in the show notes for that as well. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining me for this episode. And I very much look forward to seeing you next time.